Nnamdi Kanu, the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, has filed an urgent application at the Court of Appeal in Abuja seeking to halt his trial at the Federal High Court, with judgment now just 8 days away. The application, filed on November 12, 2025, requests an immediate stay of proceedings before Justice James Omotosho, who is scheduled to deliver his verdict on November 20. The timing of the move has added fresh drama to what is already one of Nigeria's most politically sensitive and closely watched criminal trials. Kanu's case, which has been grinding through the courts since 2015 under the file number FHC ABJ CR 383/2015, now stands at a critical juncture as his legal team races to convince the appellate court to intervene before judgment is delivered. At the core of Kanu's emergency application are three fundamental legal questions that his lawyers argue must be resolved before any verdict can legitimately be handed down. The IPOB leader contends that Justice Omotosho has refused to rule on his no-case submission, a formal legal argument asserting that the prosecution has failed to present sufficient evidence to prove the charges against him. Under Nigerian criminal procedure, defendants have the right to submit that even accepting the prosecution's evidence at face value, there is no case to answer. Kanu's legal team maintains this submission has been ignored, leaving a crucial question hanging over the entire proceedings. Beyond the no-case submission, Kanu is challenging whether the Federal High Court has proper jurisdiction to try him at all. Jurisdiction represents the bedrock of any legal proceeding, the fundamental authority that gives a court the power to hear a case. Without proper jurisdiction, any judgment rendered is legally void. By failing to determine this jurisdictional question, Kanu argues, the trial court has proceeded on potentially unstable legal foundations. The third issue concerns the validity of the charges themselves, with Kanu's team questioning whether the counts have been properly framed according to Nigerian law. These are not minor procedural quibbles but fundamental matters that go to the heart of whether the trial can legally proceed at all. Kanu's application paints a picture of a defendant trapped in an impossible situation, arguing that these unresolved issues have foreclosed his right to defend himself. The logic is straightforward but powerful. How can a defendant mount a meaningful defense when he does not know whether the court has the authority to judge him or whether the charges themselves are legally sound? Justice Omotosho has already warned Kanu that he must present his defense or risk losing the right to do so, setting up a direct confrontation between the trial judge's demand for the case to move forward and the defendant's insistence that preliminary matters must be settled first. Kanu's response through this application is unequivocal. He cannot be compelled to defend himself when the very foundation of the trial remains unexamined and unresolved. The urgency of the application stems from Kanu's argument that without a stay, the entire appeal process becomes meaningless. If Justice Omotosho delivers judgment on November 20 without first resolving these foundational issues, Kanu's lawyers warn it would create what legal practitioners call a fait accompli, an accomplished fact that cannot be undone. Even if he successfully appeals afterward, a conviction would stand on record, his liberty could hang in the balance, and the appellate process would be reduced to attempting to reverse an outcome rather than preventing an improper proceeding from concluding in the first place. The case carries weight far beyond its immediate legal questions. Nnamdi Kanu is not simply another defendant facing criminal charges in a Nigerian court. As leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, his prosecution has become deeply entangled with broader political, ethnic, and constitutional tensions in Africa's most populous nation. To his supporters, particularly in Nigeria's southeastern region, he represents a voice for self-determination and the rights of communities they believe have been marginalized. To the federal government and his critics, his movement threatens national unity and territorial integrity. The legal community is watching the case intently because the Court of Appeal's decision will establish important precedents about how Nigerian courts handle jurisdictional and procedural challenges in high-profile trials. If the appellate court grants the stay, it would affirm the principle that courts must resolve fundamental legal questions before proceeding to judgment, regardless of how long a case has been pending or how politically sensitive it may be. Such a decision would signal that the right to a fair hearing includes the right to have jurisdictional and procedural issues properly addressed before being judged. If the stay is denied, however, Justice Omotosho would proceed to deliver his verdict as planned on November 20, and Kanu would be left to appeal after judgment has been rendered. His lawyers have indicated this scenario would be deeply problematic, essentially requiring the courts to render judgment first and determine whether that judgment was proper only later. For the federal government, which has been prosecuting this case for a full decade, denial of the stay would represent movement toward finally concluding a long-running legal battle. As November 20 approaches, the Court of Appeal faces a delicate balancing act between judicial efficiency and the defendant's fundamental rights to challenge jurisdiction and have all legal issues properly addressed before judgment. The decision, expected before the scheduled judgment date, will reverberate well beyond this individual case, potentially shaping how Nigeria's courts navigate the intersection of law, politics, and justice in politically charged prosecutions.